I'm looking at footage recorded in 1999. For over 2 decades, it has circulated through forums, social media feeds, and late-night internet rabbit holes. Most people who see it remember the same details. Fishermen pulling in their nets, the sudden confusion in their voices, and something small and impossible tangled in the mesh. But what made this footage unforgettable wasn't what was caught in the net. It was what refused to leave the water nearby. According to those who were there, a larger figure circled the boat for hours. She stayed close to the surface. She watched the deck. And according to every version of the story that spread across the internet, she was waiting for them to release what they had trapped, her baby. The footage shows part of that day. A small creature with a humanoid torso and a tail, large dark eyes, and fishermen arguing about what to do while something else moves through the water just beyond the frame. The audio captures panic, disbelief, and eventually a decision that would define how millions of people understood this encounter. By the time this footage went viral, it had accumulated layers of witness testimony, expert speculation, and emotional weight. It became one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for something the ocean might be hiding from us. But compelling evidence and real evidence are not the same thing. And the truth about what happened on that boat, who filmed it, and where this footage actually came from reveals something far more complex than a simple hoax. It reveals how easily we can be convinced of the impossible when the story being told is exactly the one we want to believe. The 1999 Mermaid footage changed the conversation about what might exist in our oceans. But first, we need to understand exactly what millions of people saw and why they believed it. The video appears suddenly in your feed. Grainy, shaking. The timestamp in the corner reads 1999. You can hear wind, shouting in an unfamiliar language, and the mechanical groan of fishing equipment straining under weight. The camera focuses on a mass of netting being hauled onto the deck. Fish thrash in the mesh. Water streams onto the boards. Then the shouting changes pitch. Becomes urgent. Someone points. Tangled in the net, among the commercial catch, is something approximately 3 feet long. The camera zooms, loses focus, finds it again. The creature has a torso that reads as humanoid, defined shoulders, what appears to be a ribcage structure, arms that end in webbed appendages. Its head is proportionally large, turned away from the camera, but when it shifts, you catch a glimpse of an eye, large, dark, occupying too much of the skull. Below the torso, there is no pelvis as you'd expect on a human child. Instead, the body tapers into a muscular tail structure, covered in scale-like skin, trapped in multiple loops of netting. The creature moves, not with the mechanical flailing of a fish, suffocating in air, but with purposeful struggling. It pulls at the net with its upper limbs. Its tail flexes with what appears to be intelligent effort. Then someone shouts again, pointing overboard. The camera swings to the water, loses stability in the movement, and when it steadies, you see a shape just below the surface. Larger than the creature on deck, moving parallel to the boat. It surfaces briefly, a dark shape that could be a seal, could be a dolphin, could be something else entirely, then submerges. But it doesn't leave. The footage shows this pattern repeating. The larger figure surfaces at regular intervals, always within 20 meters of the boat, always on the same side where the net is being processed. The fishermen notice. They point. The discussion grows heated, though the language barrier means most viewers can only interpret the emotion. Confusion, argument, possibly fear. The creature on deck appears to weaken. Its movements become less coordinated. One of the fishermen approaches with what looks like a knife, crouches near the net, begins cutting specific strands. The others watch the water while he works. When enough netting is cut away, 2 men lift the creature. It's small enough that one man could carry it, but they use two, handling it carefully, avoiding the tail which continues to flex. They move to the edge of the deck. The camera follows them to the rail. The water below is dark, but you can see movement beneath the surface. Something is there. Something is waiting. They release it. The creature enters the water with barely a splash. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the larger figure appears, moving toward it where the small one went in. Both shapes merge below the surface, become one dark mass, then separate and descend together until the murky water hides them completely. The fishermen watch in silence. The camera holds on the empty water for another 10 seconds before the footage cuts to black. This is how millions of people first encountered the 1999 Mermaid video. It appeared on YouTube with titles like "Fishermen Catch Baby Mermaid, Mother Refuses to Leave," and "Real Mermaid Footage, 1999. Government doesn't want you to see this." The descriptions provided context. Location somewhere in the Mediterranean or off the South African coast. Commercial fishing vessel. Crew who chose to remain anonymous for fear of ridicule or legal consequences. The footage accumulated views slowly at first, then exponentially. Within weeks of certain uploads, comment sections filled with thousands of responses. Believers praised the fishermen's compassion. Skeptics demanded additional evidence. Marine biologists weighed in, some claiming no known species matched what the video showed, others insisting it was clearly a juvenile seal or ray captured at a deceptive angle. But what made the footage resilient against simple dismissal was its emotional narrative. This wasn't just a cryptid sighting. It was a story about a mother who wouldn't abandon her child, about humans who faced the unknown and chose mercy, about the possibility that something in the ocean might possess intelligence and emotion that we could recognize. The video hit every mark that authentic leaked footage should hit. The quality was poor enough to be believable for 1999 technology. Consumer camcorders, analog to digital conversion degradation, multiple generations of copying. The camera work was shaky and reactive, not cinematic. The audio included overlapping voices, environmental noise, and no convenient narration explaining what viewers were seeing. The event occurred at sea, in a location difficult to verify, with witnesses whose anonymity seemed reasonable given the circumstances. Most crucially, the footage showed restraint. It didn't zoom in perfectly on the creature's face. It didn't capture every angle. It included dead time, confusion, moments where nothing clearly visible was happening. These gaps felt authentic, real. Documentation of an unexpected event would be imperfect. The 1999 timestamp anchored the story in a specific era. This was before smartphones, before everyone had camera access, before social media made documentation reflexive. A commercial fishing crew in 1999 having exactly one person with a personal camcorder felt plausible. The delay between the event and the footage's online emergence made sense. Someone held onto the tape for years, then finally decided to share it once platforms existed to make that possible. By the time the video reached peak circulation, it had been stripped of original source information. Re-uploads removed any channel attribution. It existed as a free-floating piece of media, impossible to trace backward to an original poster who could be questioned or investigated. And everywhere it spread, the same details traveled with it. 1999, fishing net, baby mermaid, mother watching from the water, the agonizing decision, the compassionate release, the reunion, below the surface. The footage that changed everything was 17 seconds of actual creature visibility, surrounded by context that told viewers exactly what they were seeing. But identifying what the video appeared to show is only the first question. The second question is far more difficult. What were we actually looking at? freeze the frame at 0:34, where the camera achieves its clearest view of the creature on deck. This is the image that has been analyzed, enhanced, and debated across thousands of forums and comment threads. The creature's total length appears to be between 80 and 100 centimeters. The upper body accounts for approximately 40 centimeters, the tail structure the remainder. These proportions don't match known pinnipeds, where body taper is gradual. Here, the transition from torso to tail is distinct, almost articulated, suggesting a skeletal structure fundamentally different from seals or sea lions. The head is disproportionately large, roughly 30% of the torso length, where human infant heads are closer to 25%. It appears hairless. The skull shape is rounded, bulbous at the cranium, which could indicate significant brain volume or could indicate fluid-filled chambers that serve other purposes. Marine mammals often have adipose structures in their heads for echolocation, but the shape here doesn't match the melon structure of dolphins or the profile of any cataloged whale species. When the creature turns its head at 0:36, the eye is visible for 3 frames. It occupies perhaps 15% of the head's visible surface area. The eye appears dark, almost entirely pupil, with minimal visible sclera. This is consistent with deep-sea adapted vision, where maximum light gathering is essential. But the creature was caught in nets deployed at commercial fishing depth, between 50 and 200 meters typically, where light is diminished but not absent. The eye size suggests adaptation to darker conditions than that zone would require. The upper limbs are difficult to assess. The netting obscures full extension. What's visible shows structures that terminate in what appears to be webbing, but whether these are modified hands with interdigital webbing or something more fin-like cannot be determined from the footage. The creature uses these limbs to grasp and pull at the net, which suggests some level of manual dexterity and opposable grip strength. The shoulder structure appears broad and well-muscled, appropriate for a creature that would need to generate propulsion through water. Mammalian. The rib cage is visible beneath skin that appears smooth and glistening, either naturally moist or coated in mucus secretion, common to many marine species. Then there is the tail. Frame analysis shows it contains internal skeletal support. You can see flexion points that suggest vertebral articulation. It moves in vertical undulation, like cetacean flukes, not side to side like fish. This is significant. Vertical. Tail movement is a characteristic exclusive to marine mammals among aquatic vertebrates. It evolved independently in whales, dolphins, and sirenians as a modification of mammalian spinal flexion. CGI composition in 1999 was significantly less advanced than modern techniques, but certainly capable of producing something like this for film or television production. The question becomes whether the footage was actually from 1999 or whether that timestamp is part of the fabrication. But analysis of the creature is only half of what made this footage compelling. The other half circled the boat in the water below. The mother figure appears in the footage 7 times across the full clip. Each appearance is brief, 2 to 4 seconds. She surfaces, remains visible, then descends. The pattern is regular enough that it appears deliberate. This is not the erratic behavior of a predator following a fishing vessel for scraps, or the curiosity-driven approach of dolphins investigating a boat. This is surveillance. The size is difficult to determine without reference points, but she appears substantially larger than the creature on deck. Estimates in online discussions range from 1.5 to 2.5 meters. Though these are speculative, her shape below the surface is indistinct, a dark mass that could be almost anything. But each time she surfaces, she does so on the same side of the boat where the net is being processed, where the small creature is visible on deck. She maintains a consistent distance, approximately 15 to 20 meters, close enough to observe clearly, far enough to avoid the propellers and any attempt at capture. At 1:12 in the footage, one fisherman moves to the rail and appears to make eye contact with the figure in the water. He goes still, raises one hand, palm out. Whether this is a gesture of communication or simply a reflexive response to being watched is unclear. But the figure in the water doesn't flee. She holds position. This is the behavior that sold the story. Marine mammals are intelligent. Dolphins and orcas demonstrate problem-solving, social complexity, and individual recognition. They've been documented recognizing specific humans, showing preference or aversion based on past interactions. But this behavior, the sustained vigil, the refusal to leave while her offspring was in danger, the patient waiting for resolution, this read as something beyond animal instinct. This read as a mother who understood her baby had been taken, who assessed the situation, and who made a calculated decision to wait rather than flee or attack. Whether that interpretation is accurate or projected depends entirely on what these creatures actually were. And that depends on where this footage actually came from. The 1999 Mermaid footage is fiction. It was created for entertainment, broadcast with disclaimers that most viewers never saw, and then stripped of context as it spread across the internet. There is no mystery about its origin. There is no missing evidence waiting to be uncovered. The fishermen were actors. The creatures were animatronics and digital effects. The emotional narrative of a mother's vigil was scripted by television writers. But the video's fabricated nature doesn't fully explain why it worked. Millions of people saw this footage and believed it, even when presented with evidence of its fictional origin. They wanted it to be real. They needed it to be real. Because what this video represented was larger than the question of whether mermaids exist. It represented the possibility that Earth still contains mysteries. That 70% of our planet covered by water might hide something we haven't cataloged, haven't documented, haven't reduced to data and taxonomy. The ocean floor remains less mapped than the surface of Mars. We discover new species in deep sea environments every year. The giant squid was considered a myth until 2004, when the first living specimen was photographed in its natural habitat. If something as massive as a squid with eyes the size of dinner plates could evade detection until the 21st century, what else might exist in places we haven't looked? The mermaid archetype exists in almost every coastal culture throughout human history. Mesopotamian Atargatis, Greek sirens, Irish Meros, African Mamiwata, Japanese Ningyo. These myths are separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, yet they describe the same basic form: human above, fish below. This consistency across isolated cultures suggests either universal, symbolic meaning or collective memory of something once observed. The aquatic ape hypothesis, while not accepted by mainstream evolutionary science, proposes that human ancestors went through a semi-aquatic phase, explaining our subcutaneous fat, our instinctive breath control, our hairlessness compared to other primates. If one branch of hominids adapted to coastal and aquatic environments, while another remained terrestrial, could a population have survived in isolation? These questions are worth asking, even if this particular footage doesn't answer them. What the 1999 Mermaid video revealed most clearly is not evidence of cryptids, but evidence of human longing. We want the world to be stranger than we've been told. We want compassion to exist across species boundaries. We want mothers, human or otherwise, to be willing to risk everything for their children. We want to believe that when faced with the unknown, humans might choose mercy over exploitation. The footage gave us a story where all of those hopes were validated. That's why it spread. That's why people defended it against debunking. That's why, even now, comment sections fill with viewers saying they don't care if it's fake because it made them feel something real. The ocean covers 361 million square kilometers. We've explored less than 20% of it. In the deepest trenches, in the unmapped abyssal plains, in the thousands of underwater cave systems we've never entered, there is room for things we haven't found. The 1999 Mermaid wasn't one of them, but something else might be. The footage lasts 93 seconds. But the narrative that built around those 93 seconds transformed them into something far larger. What viewers saw wasn't just a strange creature caught in netting. It was a story that tapped into something primal, the bond between parent and child, the recognition of intelligence in another being's eyes, the moment when the impossible becomes undeniably present. According to the accounts that spread with the video, the fishermen noticed the larger figure within minutes of discovering what was tangled in their net. She appeared off the starboard side, her head breaking the surface perhaps 20 feet from the boat, and then she stayed. The behavior described in these retellings was specific, deliberate. She didn't thrash or attack. She didn't flee. She circled slowly, maintaining a consistent distance from the vessel, her movements fluid and controlled. Witnesses claimed she surfaced repeatedly in the same pattern, appearing, watching, submerging, reappearing. Always at that same careful distance, always oriented toward the spot where the net was being hauled aboard. What made the story resonate wasn't aggression or spectacle, it was patience. She waited. The descriptions emphasized her eyes, dark, large, too human in their expressiveness. Several versions of the story claimed she made direct eye contact with specific crew members. Not the blank stare of a fish or seal, but focused attention. The kind of gaze that registers the presence of another conscious being. The kind that communicates intent. In the most widely circulated version of events, one fisherman approached the tangled creature as the mother surfaced again. The moment he moved closer to the netting, she stopped circling. She remained stationary in the water, vertical, her upper body visible above the surface, watching him, watching what he would do to her child. The story framed this as communication stripped to its essence. No shared language, no gestures that required cultural context. Just a mother refusing to leave while her offspring remained in danger, and a human crew gradually understanding what they were witnessing. The dialogue attributed to the fishermen, whether real, imagined, or fabricated in later retellings, always followed the same emotional arc. Initial confusion, growing realization, moral conflict, the recognition that they were holding leverage in a situation they'd never anticipated facing. In these accounts, the men discussed what to do. Some versions claimed they debated bringing both creatures to shore, recognizing the potential value of such a discovery. Others suggested contacting authorities or research institutions. But always, the story returned to the same image. The mother in the water, maintaining her vigil, her presence a constant reminder that something conscious and capable of emotional bonds was waiting for their decision. The physical description of her behavior added layers of credibility to believers. She didn't behave like a curious animal investigating a boat. Her movements were too purposeful. She maintained that specific distance, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid being caught herself. When the boat's engine rumbled to life at one point, she reportedly dove immediately, only to resurface once the noise stopped. Pattern recognition, cause and effect reasoning, evidence of a mind assessing threat and adjusting behavior accordingly. The footage itself showed only glimpses of her, a dark shape in the water, surfacing briefly, too distant and too quick for clear resolution. But the narrative filled in what the camera couldn't capture. Viewers were told she had similar features to the creature in the net. The same large eyes, the same vaguely humanoid upper body structure, the proportions of something that belonged in deep water, but carried echoes of human morphology. What the story emphasized most was her refusal to approach the boat directly. This detail became crucial to the narrative's emotional weight. She didn't try to climb aboard or grab at the netting. She didn't ram the hull or create chaos. Instead, she demonstrated what believers interpreted as both intelligence and restraint. The understanding that aggression would likely doom her child, and the discipline to suppress whatever instincts might have driven her to attack. The crew's response, as the legend told it, shifted gradually. The initial panic visible in the footage, the shouting, the sudden movements, gave way to something quieter, a stillness as understanding set in. They stopped trying to get a better look at the creature in the net and started watching the one in the water. They stopped discussing discovery and started discussing something else entirely: compassion. The turning point in every version of the story came when the fishermen made their choice. Carefully, they began working the netting loose, not cutting it. The accounts were specific about this, but untangling it strand by strand, minimizing harm to the creature. The process took time. The mother remained in position throughout, her vigil unbroken. When the juvenile finally came free, the descriptions became almost mythic in their emotional resonance. The small creature, no longer restrained, moved to the edge of the deck. The mother surfaced again, closer now than she'd been. Before, her caution abandoned, in the moment of reunion. The crew lifted the juvenile. Some versions said gently, others claimed they simply let it slide back into the sea. And it entered the water. What happened next was the story's emotional climax. Mother and offspring together in the water, beside the boat, visible for just seconds before they dove. Swimming in tandem, moving away from the vessel toward deeper water. The mother's vigil ended not in tragedy, but in reunion, made possible by human choice. The final detail that appeared in many retellings. Before she disappeared beneath the surface for the last time, the mother turned back toward the boat. One final look at the men who had returned her child. Recognition, some claimed. Gratitude, others insisted. At minimum, acknowledgement that these beings had made a decision when they could have made another. It was a perfect narrative arc. Discovery, conflict, moral choice, resolution. The kind of structure that feels true because it satisfies something fundamental in how humans process stories. The vulnerable rescued, the parent reunited with their child, the powerful choosing mercy over exploitation. And it resonated globally for exactly that reason. The mother's vigil became the emotional anchor that transformed strange footage into a phenomenon. Without her presence in the story, the video showed only an odd creature in netting. Interesting, perhaps, but isolated. With her, it became a story about connection across impossible boundaries, about recognizing consciousness in a form that shouldn't exist, about choosing right action when faced with the unknown. It was, as countless comment sections declared, proof that compassion transcends species, that intelligence can be recognized without language, that some bonds are universal enough to bridge even the gap between human and something that lived in depths we'd barely explored. The story was powerful. The story was moving. The story was everything people wanted to believe about both the ocean's mysteries and humanity's capacity for decency, which should have been the first warning sign. The human element of the story carried as much weight as the creatures themselves. In the versions that spread across forums, social media, and cryptozoology websites, the fishermen weren't simply passive witnesses to an impossible encounter. They were active participants in a moral drama that forced them to make choices with no clear precedent. Ordinary working men confronted with the extraordinary, Their responses documented in those 93 seconds of footage and elaborated in the accounts that followed. The video showed chaos initially. Voices raised, overlapping in what sounded like Portuguese or Spanish depending on which analysis you read. Men moving quickly across the deck, their body language sharp with surprise. Hands pointing toward the water, then back to the netting, then to the water again. The amateur quality of the footage, its shaking, its sudden pans, its moments of blur, reinforced the impression of genuine shock. The dialogue, when subtitled in various versions shared online, followed predictable patterns. Profanity and religious exclamations. Demands to know what they were looking at. Questions about whether others were seeing the same thing. The universal verbal markers of people whose understanding of reality had just been challenged. But the story that grew around the footage focused on what came after that initial reaction. The moment, believers claimed, when the shock receded, and the crew had to decide what to do with what they'd found. The moral conflict described in these accounts was framed in stark terms. On one side, scientific discovery, potential fame, financial reward. The creature in their net represented something unknown to science. Proof of a species that shouldn't exist. The kind of find that transforms careers and rewrites textbooks. Any marine biologist, any research institution, any private collector would pay extraordinary sums for access to such a specimen. Living or dead, it had immense value. On the other, a mother waiting in the water. A juvenile creature showing signs of distress. The recognition that consciousness might not be limited to forms humans had cataloged and categorized. The accounts emphasized that several crew members wanted to keep the creature. Not from cruelty, the story was careful about this, but from understandable human impulses. Curiosity about what they'd found. Awareness of the opportunity they were holding. The practical recognition that fishermen working these waters didn't often encounter chances for financial windfalls. The few details offered about the crew were vague enough to be universal. Working-class men, experienced with the sea, multilingual. The mixed Portuguese and Spanish, supposedly heard in the audio, suggested a South American crew, possibly Brazilian. But the ambiguity allowed the story to belong to any maritime culture. They were every fisherman and no fisherman, specific enough to feel real, generic enough to resist investigation. The moral framework the story imposed on their choice became its lasting legacy. Here were men who could have exploited their discovery but chose not to, who recognized consciousness in an impossible form and responded with decency, who understood that some knowledge doesn't need to be captured and cataloged, who saw mother's love and couldn't bring themselves to cause more suffering. It was humanity at its best, the story insisted. Compassion in the face of wonder. Restraint when exploitation would have been easy. The choice to let the mystery remain mysterious rather than destroy it through exposure. The fisherman's dilemma, as told and retold, became a parable about what we owe to the unknown. About the ethics of discovery. About whether finding something impossible obligates us to prove it to others, and whether some encounters are meant to remain private, shared only among those present and protected from the world's scrutiny. It was a beautiful story about beautiful choices made by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, which made what happened next, when the investigation traced the footage to its actual source, all the more devastating to those who'd believed. The footage appeared online sometime in the early 2000s. No fanfare, no press release, just a grainy video clip that began circulating through forums, then social media, then everywhere at once. Within weeks, it had been viewed millions of times. Within months, it had become one of the internet's most debated pieces of cryptozoological evidence. The title varied depending on where you found it. Fishermen catch mermaid baby, 1999. Mother Mermaid refuses to leave her child. Real mermaid footage from fishing boat. The details shifted, but the core remained constant. Fishermen in 1999 had captured something impossible, and the footage proved it. YouTube filled with reaction videos. Cryptozoology channels dissected every frame. Paranormal investigators analyzed the audio for underwater vocalizations. Marine biology students debated whether the tales showed anatomical consistency with known aquatic mammals. The comment sections became battlegrounds between believers and skeptics, each side convinced the other was willfully blind. The footage had everything a viral phenomenon needed. It was short enough to watch repeatedly, analyzing new details with each viewing. The quality was poor enough to hide scrutiny, but clear enough to show something that looked disturbingly real. Most crucially, it told a complete emotional story in under 2 minutes. Discovery, recognition, moral choice, resolution. You didn't need context. You didn't need explanation. The narrative was self-contained. Reaction videos followed a predictable pattern. The host would watch silently, eyes widening at the moment the baby creature came into frame. They'd pause, rewind, zoom in on the mother figure circling in the water. "Did you see that?" became the most common refrain. "Look at the eyes. Look at how she's watching them." The 1999 timestamp did heavy work. It placed the event in a specific, technological moment, after video cameras became accessible, but before smartphones put recording devices in every pocket. The grainy quality made sense for 1999. The lack of high-definition scrutiny made sense. The fact that it surfaced online years later made sense because internet culture in 1999 was barely nascent. People who would have questioned footage allegedly from 2010 accepted the same quality from 1999 without hesitation. Cryptozoology forums dedicated entire threads to frame-by-frame analysis. If this happened in 1999, where was the immediate coverage? A fishing crew catches something that appears humanoid, that appears intelligent, that appears to be a juvenile member of an unknown species while its mother circles the boat. This isn't a strange fish. This is first contact with what could be another form of intelligent life sharing our planet. That should have been front-page news within days. Maritime authorities would have been notified the moment the boat reached port. Every marine biology department within 1,000 miles would have descended on the location. The vessel's name, the crew manifest, the exact coordinates, all of it would be documented, verified, studied. Instead, there's nothing. No contemporary news reports from 1999. No scientific papers. No government investigation. The footage appears online years later with no chain of custody, no named witnesses, no verifiable details beyond 1999 and fishermen and somewhere at sea. The delay between the alleged event and the footage's viral spread creates another problem. Why would video of the most significant zoological discovery in human history sit in someone's drawer for over a decade? Why surface it on social media rather than bringing it to scientific institutions? Why allow what could be definitive proof of an unknown species to languish in obscurity for years? Some defenders of the footage's authenticity argue the fishermen were afraid, that they feared government confiscation of the tape, or ridicule, or legal consequences for not reporting the catch. But this explanation doesn't hold. You don't sit on evidence this significant because you're worried about paperwork. Fear might keep you quiet for weeks, maybe months, not for more than a decade. The 1999 date was chosen carefully, whether consciously or not. It's far enough back that poor video quality seems reasonable. It's recent enough that the technology makes sense. No one questions whether fishing boats had cameras in 1999. It's distant enough that memories have faded, records have been misplaced, and the difficulty of verification seems understandable rather than suspicious. This temporal sweet spot allows the footage to exist in a verification vacuum. Too old for easy fact-checking, too recent to dismiss as ancient history. The year provides just enough distance to make the lack of evidence seem like unfortunate circumstance rather than deliberate absence. But when you trace the footage backward through the internet, looking for its origin point, you don't find fishermen's forums from the early 2000s. You don't find maritime safety reports or Coast Guard inquiries or local news segments from coastal towns. The trail doesn't lead to 1999 at all. It leads to 2012. The video doesn't appear in 1999. It doesn't surface in 2000 or 2001, or anywhere in the early internet era when such footage would have spread through email chains and early video sharing sites. The earliest verifiable appearances of this specific footage cluster around 2012 and 2013. This 13-year gap isn't explained by the footage's defenders. It's ignored, treated as irrelevant compared to what the video appears to show. But timing is everything in viral content. Something this extraordinary wouldn't wait more than a decade to find an audience. When you track the footage through its various uploads and shares, through reaction videos and documentary-style breakdowns, the references don't point backward to fishing communities or maritime incident reports. They point to television, specifically to Animal Planet. In 2012, Animal Planet aired a special called Mermaids, the Body Found. It was presented in documentary style, using found footage aesthetics, scientific-sounding narration, and what appeared to be genuine news clips and research footage. The special featured interviews with scientists, showed classified government footage, and built a case for the existence of aquatic humanoids using a mixture of real science and complete fabrication. The show never clearly labeled itself as fiction. It used the mockumentary format, presenting invented material as factual, with only small disclaimers buried in the credits that few viewers saw. The intent was to blur the line between documentary and drama, creating something that felt real enough to spark conversation and debate. The special was extraordinarily successful. It became one of Animal Planet's most watched programs, generated massive social media engagement, and sparked genuine belief in millions of viewers. The network followed it with Mermaids, the new evidence, in 2013, doubling down on the format and introducing additional footage. Our viral video, the one allegedly from 1999, contains segments that match footage created for these specials. Not similar footage, the same footage, same angles, same creatures, same scenarios. The baby mermaid in the net, the mother circling the boat. These scenes were produced by Animal Planet's production team using a combination of animatronics, CGI, and actors. The production quality was deliberately degraded to mimic old video. The footage was artificially grainied, compressed, and made to look weathered. This wasn't accidental. It was an aesthetic choice designed to make fictional content feel like authentic archival material. When that content was later extracted from the special and shared without context, the degraded quality served as false authentication. The fishermen in the footage were actors. The boat was a set. The creatures were special effects. Every element that seemed to prove the footage's authenticity, the amateur camera work, the genuine seeming reactions, the imperfect quality, was carefully constructed to create exactly that impression. Animal Planet didn't create the footage to hoax the internet. They created it for entertainment television, trusting viewers to understand the mockumentary format. But once released, the footage took on a life beyond the network's control. The viral clip that traveled the world didn't come from a 1999 VHS tape discovered in someone's archive. It came from a television production designed specifically to blur the line between documentary and fantasy, wrapped in enough scientific language to feel plausible. This wasn't an accident. It was the entire point. The programs were mockumentaries, a format that uses documentary aesthetics to tell fictional stories. Shaky camera work, grainy footage, nervous dialogue, handheld shots that feel stolen rather than staged. The visual language of authenticity applied to fabricated events. Animal Planet promoted the specials as explorations of what could be true, framing mermaid legends within genuine scientific debates like the aquatic ape hypothesis, a real, though highly contested theory suggesting human ancestors may have gone through a semi-aquatic evolutionary phase. By anchoring fantasy in legitimate science, the shows gave viewers permission to believe. Charlie Foley, the creator, stated openly that the goal was to make mermaids seem plausible, not proven, not documented, but possible. Wrapping myth in the structure of investigation. And it worked, spectacularly. The network did include disclaimers. Small text at the end of the credits identified the programs as science fiction. But those disclaimers were brief, easy to miss, and entirely absent once clips were extracted and uploaded to YouTube, Facebook, forums, and blogs. Stripped of context, the footage became evidence. The 1999 date wasn't arbitrary. It was strategic. Placing the encounter in the pre-smartphone era gave the grainy quality a justification. Of course, the footage looked rough. It was filmed on late 90s equipment. The timestamp anchored the fiction in a time when such discoveries might have slipped through the cracks of media coverage. Except nothing slipped. There was no coverage to slip through because there was no event. What we're watching in the viral clip is professional filmmaking. The mother's behavior, her slow, deliberate circles, her refusal to attack, the way she seems to make eye contact, was storyboarded. Her appearance was designed by effects artists who understood exactly how to make something look real enough to pass a casual viewer's scrutiny, but not so polished it triggered skepticism. The fishermen's dialogue, their panicked reactions, the moment they decide to release the creature, all written, performed, edited for maximum emotional impact. This wasn't a hoax in the traditional sense. It wasn't someone trying to fool the public by presenting fiction as fact. Mainstream science largely rejects the hypothesis. But it's not fringe pseudoscience. It's a debated idea with enough legitimacy to appear in academic discussions. By building their fictional mermaids on this foundation, the producers gave viewers a conceptual framework that sounded educated, researched, credible. They didn't just invent creatures. They invented an evolutionary backstory, complete with fossil evidence, anatomical diagrams, and expert testimony from actors playing marine biologists and anthropologists. The programs also wove in real events, documented naval sonar activity, actual mass whale beachings, genuine government agencies like NOAA. Mixing verifiable facts with fabricated narrative is a classic disinformation technique. It makes the fiction harder to separate from reality. The disclaimers existed, but they were perfunctory. A few seconds of small text at the end of an hour of programming that had spent every minute building the case for mermaids being real. Legally, the network was covered. Practically, the disclaimers did nothing. When clips were extracted and shared online, even that minimal protection vanished. A 2-minute video titled "Fishermen Catch Baby Mermaid, 1999" carried no context, no credits, no hint of its origin, just raw footage that appeared to document the impossible. And because the footage was designed to be shared, to go viral, to spark debate, it succeeded beyond the network's likely expectations. Animal Planet knew what they were doing. The specials weren't accidental misinformation. They were crafted to occupy the space between entertainment and documentary, to let viewers believe what they wanted to believe. The Mother Mermaid's vigil, her refusal to leave, the fisherman's moral struggle, those weren't just scenes. They were emotional beats calculated to resonate. The story worked because it tapped into universal themes: parental love, compassion across difference, the hope that intelligence and empathy exist beyond humanity. It was effective storytelling. And when storytelling is this effective, it stops being just a story. The response was global. The specials aired in dozens of countries. Clips accumulated hundreds of millions of views across platforms. Forums debated the footage frame by frame. Believers and skeptics argued with genuine passion. And in 2012, the US government felt compelled to respond. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, issued an official statement on their website. No evidence of aquatic humanoids has ever been found. A federal scientific agency had to publicly deny the existence of mermaids because a cable television program had been so convincing that people were contacting the government asking for confirmation. That's not a typical outcome for a fictional TV show. The mockumentary format had worked too well. By erasing the visible boundary between fact and fiction, by using every tool of documentary filmmaking to build belief, Animal Planet created something that escaped their control. The footage is still circulating, still being shared as real, still convincing new viewers every day. Because the truth, that it was made for television, that every element was fabricated, requires effort to discover. You have to search. You have to dig past the emotional impact and investigate the source. Most people don't. They see the clip. They feel the moment. They believe. And in that gap between what's real and what feels real, the mockumentary thrives. In 2012, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration did something it had never done before. It published an official statement on its website titled, "No evidence of aquatic humanoids has ever been found." A government science agency felt compelled to deny the existence of mermaids. The statement was direct. No evidence of aquatic humanoids has ever been found. Why then do they occupy the collective unconscious of nearly all seafaring peoples? That's a question best left to historians, philosophers, and anthropologists. NOAA didn't issue this statement because of ancient folklore. They issued it because millions of people had watched Animal Planet's Mermaid specials and believed they were watching real science. Phone calls came in. Emails flooded their public affairs office. People wanted to know why the government was hiding evidence. They wanted to know what else was down there. The statement appeared shortly after Mermaid's The Body Found aired. The timing wasn't coincidental. NOAA was responding to public confusion on a scale they hadn't anticipated. Media outlets worldwide covered the NOAA statement, which only amplified the phenomenon. Headlines about a government agency denying mermaids gave the story another cycle of attention. For believers, the statement became evidence of cover-up. For skeptics, it was proof the hoax had worked too well. The phenomenon had escaped containment. What started as entertainment had become something its creators likely never intended, a widely believed conspiracy with international reach. The footage worked because we needed it to work. The ocean covers 71% of Earth's surface. We've mapped less than 20% of the seafloor in detail. More humans have walked on the moon than have visited the deepest parts of our own ocean. That vast unknown functions as a reservoir for possibility. If something strange exists anywhere on this planet, The deep sea is where it could hide. The mermaid isn't a modern invention. The archetype appears across cultures that never contacted each other. Greek sirens, African mamiwata, Japanese ningyo, Mesopotamian atargatis. The image of a human-fish hybrid lives in our collective mythology. We're predisposed to recognize it. This particular story added something those ancient tales lacked: maternal love. The mother refusing to leave her trapped baby created an emotional through line that transcended species. It wasn't a monster story. It was a story about devotion that happened to involve creatures we didn't understand. The found footage format bypassed intellectual defenses. Polished documentaries trigger skepticism. Shaky cameras and panicked voices feel authentic. They feel witnessed. The imperfection became proof. Animal Planet understood all of this. They built their mockumentary on psychological foundations that had supported belief for thousands of years. They simply added modern production techniques and the vast distribution network of cable television and the internet. The footage revealed something true. We want the world to contain more than we've cataloged. We want the frontier to still exist somewhere. So the 1999 Mermaid footage is fiction. But calling it just fiction misses something. It moved millions because it tapped into a longing older than the internet. We want Earth to hold secrets. We want the deep ocean, that last unmapped frontier covering 70% of our planet, to contain more than fish and pressure and darkness. The footage isn't real. What it revealed about us is, we still believe, despite everything we've been told, that something extraordinary might be circling just beneath the surface. And maybe that hope matters more than the truth of a single video. The deep remains, unexplored, waiting